Hello, in this video I'm going to demonstrate use of keyword called this. Let's begin by creating a project. I'll call it as using this keyword. Let us also add a program and make it part of a package as usual. Now this is just a program, so let's add a main and let's create a class. Now remember, this is a new project and there are no other classes other than this, but we can ask Eclipse to create a class for me. So I can say here person p1 equals to new person, and Eclipse is now going to check where is this class person, and we don't have a class called person. So obviously when I move the mouse on that error, then you get 7 quick fixes available, but one of the first ones here is create a class called person. When I do that, it'll bring up the dialog box predefining the class name and the package name and so on, and I can go and change this to vinod.entity as the package, and of course I can just say finish. Now the class person is also being imported in the program because the dialog box that created the class also added this. Now that we have a person class, let us define some member variables. Now it's a good practice to define these fields as private. So let's start by creating private, probably string first name, and then private string last name. And then of course a city as one member variable. Now we can also add a default constructor by default by pressing Control space and then enter. Of course, I don't need this to do, so remove the to do's because that is kind of an indication for you to do something, and if you don't have anything to do, so please delete that. Now we will also add a methods which are getters and setters. So we know that there is an option that says that source generate getters and setters, so we get that, and we can select all of them, say okay, we get this. Now we also can add a toString method, and that's because we would like to print the object directly, and that option is available in the source, and then say generate toString. Now when you say toString, it will ask you what are the fields you would like to print as part of the toString, and I would like to have these two together, or I can also create my own. What is the style of printing? Is it concatenation? You want to use a string buffer builder, or probably string.format, which is a Java 5 feature, so we can use that also, and then probably say OK. And you can see it says person is the name of the class, first name equals to percentage, last name equals to percentage, city equals to this. Alternately, you can also simply change this to say person with just the name of the person and probably a city, so in bracket, or probably comma percentage. So that's going to be my format. So person, first name, last name, and the city. So save this and let's go and check this out in the program. So I'm going to go create here p1 dot set first name, and then you can give, let's say I give my name, p1 dot set last name, and I'll give my last name, and then p1 dot set city, let's give Bangalore as the city. And then I can just print p1 itself, where p1.toString is going to be invoked, and when that is invoked, it's going to return this formatted string that comprises of the name of the class and the name of the person and the city itself. So let's go save it, execute it, and you can see we get person Vinod Kumar, Bangalore. So we got this output. Now since we wanted to understand the keyword this, let's jump into one of these functions. Now you can control click and it comes over here. Now if you see that the name of the function set first name receives a string parameter and does not return any value. That's the way a setter is written. However, now you can observe here that there is a keyword called this being used. Now what is the purpose of this? Let's remove it and see if my program works as expected. We get a warning there, but we'll just execute the code and see what happens. And you can see I supplied Vinod, but it was never received into the member variable. Now why is it so? Let's control click on this, and when we go back here, you can see that there is a parameter here called first name, and that first name is assigned with the same value. And once this particular function call is over, that variable first name locally created is removed from the memory. Now, to avoid that, we want to take this variable's value and then should be able to assign to this. But within this scope, both of them have the same variable name, and we don't have any way of differentiating that. So one of the good way to do is to use one underscore or some kind of prefix, and now you do something like this. This is okay. So when you execute, we're able to see that particular data. However, using an underscore is not a good practice to follow, because now since this is given to the user as if it is a hint, when somebody is calling what exactly is the signature, you can see that it's showing up over here, and showing underscores in these kind of signatures is not a good practice. Now, when you call a function like this, we think that we are supplying one parameter, which is true anyways, but implicitly there will be another parameter supplied. So it is equivalent to something like set first name P1 and Vinod. So the invoking reference, the reference that was used for invoking this particular function, is supplied as argument, and in here it is received as something like public void set first name, and there will be a variable called object. Basically this is person this, and then string first name. Now you can't see, you only have to picturize this and assume that. So whatever the invoking reference P1, that reference is received into a variable called this, and using that you can access any of these member variable, and you can say here this dot first name is equals to the parameter that is not required any variable. Yeah, that's just a local variable. You don't need to prefix that with any scope or any reference type. Now this is the way it is working, and this keyword this can be used for accessing the members. The keyword this can also be used for invoking constructors, but that is only possible from another constructor. So obviously for that to work, you must have another constructor. So let us create a constructor called public person, and I'll just declare here string first name. Probably I'll copy this variable over here, and I can say this dot first name equals to first name. So as you can see that I have a constructor to which I can supply a first name, and then that can be successfully assigned over here. So if I go back to program 01, and I'm going to go type here person P2 equals to new person, and I'll supply another name, and this time I have created a person object with first name automatically, and then if I say P2 or probably sysout P2, you can see that I get Sham, null and null. Of course we can avoid that, but anyway you can see that I'm able to supply that values. So if you really want to supply some defaults to some constructor, you can do that also. For that, let us create one more constructor, public person, and which takes all the parameters, that is string first name, first parameter, string last name as the second parameter, and then of course string city is the third parameter, where it's going to say this dot first name equals to first name, and this dot last name equals to last name, and this dot city equals to city. Now when we have this particular person being initialized only with a first name, we got null and null. How about passing the control to this constructor with some default last name and city? For example, instead of doing this, we can say here pass the control to this constructor which takes 3 arguments. Now I can use the keyword this for the purpose. So I can supply first name, user has supplied, second name not supplied, last name is not supplied, city I'll assume defaults to be Bangalore, and then now we can see that when the user invokes this constructor which takes a single argument, it comes over here, it is received but then passed on back to this constructor where name is received as Sham, last name is null, and our blank empty string, that empty string is assigned over here, Bangalore is assigned to city, eventually assigned here. So when I execute the same code this time, you see that it's not going to be Sham and null, but instead it's going to be Sham and Bangalore. And there is an empty string that was associated with this name. So this is the use of the keyword this.